Hello and welcome to Jerry's Live. My name is Michaela Westra and I'm going to be your host this evening. Now today we're talking about some paper, and today's paper is going to be all about Magnani. And if you've seen some of our shows before, you'll know that I love their paper, and so we're going over some of the papers that we kind of touched on before and one that we haven't touched on before, so this is going to be kind of fun. In order to bring these two different papers together into a similar subject, we're looking at printmaking. Now, I've talked about, I believe it was etching before. Today we're going to talk about lino-cut printing, and we're also going to do a monoprinting process using a jelly plate. So if you're interested in either of those topics, this is a great episode for you. Now, before we jump into the process, I want to tell you a little bit about the paper and the brand of Magnani itself. So let's go ahead and talk about them. Now, Magnani is a truly proud Italian company, and they are based out of Toscana, Italy. Their mill started in Pescia in the 15th century, and it is one of the oldest paper mills, out there, which is really cool. And they've helped out artists like Annigoni, Napoleon Bonaparte, and Picasso, for example. So they've been around for a long time and helped out some pretty prolific artists over the years. All of their paper is going to be 100% cotton and mold made, but we'll get into all of that in a little bit. So let's go ahead and start with one of them in particular. Now, the one I wanted to start with is called the Firenze paper, and it is going to be their paper made specifically for acrylic painting. Now, this is going to be used for mostly acrylic painting, but it's available for all, what's the word I'm looking for? Liquid-based media. So watercolor, gouache, ink works beautifully on this paper. And actually, if you are aware of their other water media papers like the Italia, Toscana, and Portofino, those are their watercolor papers. Their Toscana, the rough paper, if that's not quite rough enough for you, the Firenze is going to be a little bit more rough for water media. Now, on here actually, let's go ahead to our overhead. They have little certifications or medallions on the front here that talks about how their paper is made, what they're about, and how great their quality is, really. So over here on the side, this top one here, there's 4 of them here. This top one, like I said, they're all mold-made paper, and I'll tell you a little bit about the process once I'm done with this. The paper is going to be acid-free, it has a long life, and OBA-free. Now, OBA is going to stand for optical brightener agent, so that means they're not adding anything to this to make it brighter. Everything in here is just going to be purely cotton. This is their natural color, and since they're not adding these brightening agents, it's not going to yellow over time. Now, for the Firenze paper, they have the pads, which is going to be, it's glued on one side, but they also have sheets. So if you're looking to do a really big project with acrylic paper, they have ginormous sheets of paper, 22 by 30. If you want to go really big, you can always cut this down. This is how they come. They come in sheets of 10 and either 20 or 50. Our wonderful moderators, I have Jillian and Amanda today. If you're really curious about that, pop that in the chat and they'll be able to let you know exactly. But because these papers are mold made, all 4 edges of those large sheets are going to be deckled, and they will have a Magnani watermark in the bottom right corner. Now let's go ahead and talk about the mold making process. So what happens when they are making these? They start with 100% cotton and they put it into a pulper. And they put it through 2 of those. So one of them mixes that cotton in with the water, and another one kind of refines it before it goes through the cylinder. The cylinder is going to be wrapped completely in mesh, and they'll weld the little Magnani watermark into the cylinder. And the cylinder is going to roll into this kind of a pool of pulp, and it's going to allow the pulp to sit on the surface of that mesh cylinder, and the water is going to seep through the mesh and drain out the bottom. It's going to keep going through, and it's going to go through a dryer. It's going to then go through a wet press that removes all of the water, and then it will go through a marking felt. And the marking felt is going to be different for each kind of paper. So for the Firenze, this has a very rough surface. It's going to have a kind of a rougher felt texture. That's where it's going to get this texture from, that felt process. Then it's going to be dried again, and then that's where the sizing comes in. So the Firenze paper is going to be both externally and internally sized. So they'll have the sizing earlier in the process, and then after the drying process and the marking process, they'll size it again for the external sizing. I hope that was understandable. It's a really fun process. If you want to watch a video on that, I'll post that on the Facebook group if you're interested. Again, let us know in the chat if you are. All right, so let's go ahead and see what it looks like to put something on this surface. Now, here is a print that I already did. Let me show you the texture real quick. It's going to be rougher than the Toscana if you are familiar with their paper. But it's a really nice texture, similar to canvas, but a little bit more random than a canvas weave. I already did a jelly plate print. Now I haven't pulled this off the jelly plate yet, so you can kind of see jelly plate is already stuck to the paper. I'll walk you through how I did this, but I did want to show you what it looks like pulling the print, and then I'll walk you through the process of how I got there. So let's go ahead and peel this off. You have to wait for the acrylic to dry for this specific process before you peel it off. And you can actually see on the other side, it is clear. And I have this just to protect. I'll tell you why in a second. I like to pull it off this way. So here is my print. Now the reason I had this clear sheet, this comes with the jelly plate. The plate will take on any texture that it is put up against. So whether it's the weave of this canvas sheeting that I have, or paper, or wood, that texture is going to transfer into your jelly plate. So if I'm not putting it on something smooth or shiny, I like to have this on the back side, just to maintain a nice smooth texture. And I can clean that off a little bit later. But here is my print. I put a couple thick layers of acrylic on here, and this was actually 2 layers. So the first layer, I laid down the structure of my drawing, and I put down the base colors of everything. And then I looked at it and I was like, that's not quite what I was going for. It seemed a little too poppy, not quite enough contrast. So I did another layer, but I'll show you how I did that. Here's the finished one here. Let's move these out of the way. And I'll walk you through how I did that. So, this is my jelly plate. I'm going to clean it off with just water. And I'm going to be using paper towel. Be careful when you use paper towel. You don't want those fibers to stay on the surface. So try not to rub too hard.
Just to double check, you're using the Firenze paper, right?
Yes, yep. I'm starting with the Firenze paper. That is going to be the acrylic made paper. Or paper made for acrylic. So I'm not too worried about being perfect about this. And I will say that these do get a little funky over time, but they're still going to do what they're aiming to do. Now for this, since it is clear, if you wanted to, you could take your image and pop it underneath your jelly plate and get the structure of your image that way, which is what I did for this one here. Or you can put your drawing under there, whatever it is you need to do. But this is great, the jelly plate, because you can use Posca. You can use acrylic. Those are going to be the two mediums I use for this today. The paper itself can be used with these acrylic markers, acrylic paint, ink, gouache, watercolor, like I said before. But this is what I did. So I drew my image with Posca. And then I went in with acrylic paint. Now you can do acrylic paint one of two ways. And today I have just a pack of Lucas Cryl Studio acrylic and a disposable palette, which I have off to the side here. And maybe I'll just grab some purple. Now, the two ways you can apply acrylic to this jelly plate for this printing process, you can use brushes, or you can use a brayer. So you can lay down the paint on here, and you don't have to worry too much about how thick it is in order for the print to transfer. But you do have to worry about how thick it is in terms of how quickly it dries. So if you lay down some thick paint, just be aware that the drying process is going to take a little bit longer. So I'm filling in kind of my detailed areas with my brush, because when I get to the brayer, it's mostly just going to be used to fill the entire plate with one color. So here's my brayer. Maybe I'll go in with just some white. It'll pick up some of that purple since it's not dry, and it'll make a nice lavender color, I hope. And for that, if you're not familiar with using a brayer in printmaking, I'm just going to make a little line with my acrylic. And then I'll take the brayer, start pulling it down, and make a nice square so that my brayer is fully coated. And then I'll just coat this whole thing. Since it's not dry, it is picking that up, but I do just want to show you the process. And then if you are doing this way, like if you're not worried about adding a bunch of layers and you've already put down something super quick, you can just have, let me grab some Firenze paper before it dries. You can just put this on here right away. And I do have this guy, which I'll tell you about. And this will dry, soak into the paper, and then you can peel it off. Now, what I did for this one is I took a long time placing down the colors. So they were drying before I even got to the second color. So what I did is I laid down everything, let it dry completely on the jelly plate. And then I went in with Liquitex acrylic medium, their satin gel. I used the brayer to put a nice thick layer of that over the entire back of my dried acrylic painting on the jelly plate. And then I put the paper on and let that satin gel adhere to the acrylic on the jelly plate as well as the paper, so that when I pulled it off, I have all of those layers fused together. And you can do that for multiple layers, like I said. So I had this, and then I thought this wasn't quite contrasty enough, so I just went in with another blue, some white, some more brown, And then I covered the whole thing again with more of that gel medium and added a second layer. Now, the way I have a nice border and I was able to line up those two layers together so well is because I used the the Firenze paper in 12 by 16, and I chopped it down so it was exactly a 1-inch border. Then I can use this guy, which is made for jelly plates. I can pop it up along the corner and perfectly place that on my jelly plate and have a nice inch border, and everything lines up perfectly with every separate layer. Do we have a question?
We have two quick ones.
Sure.
Can you use drawing paper with the jelly plate is number one, and then if you write on it, will it print backwards?
Yes, so it will print backwards. I will say, I did have this sitting underneath my jelly plate and I was kind of tracing where things were. It did flip. So every time you do printmaking, be aware that they are going to flip. So if you have words, make sure you print out your image backwards, or your sketch, make sure you practice flipping your words backwards, or you can do it digitally if you want to. But make sure that if you have words, especially, that you flip your image. Was there another question, or was that it?
The drawing paper.
Drawing paper, okay. So, like the Magnani paper, I think you could, but drawing paper isn't made to adhere as well to the acrylic. There might be some issues. I haven't fully played with that, and it might tear the paper. This paper, the Firenze paper, is going to be 188 pounds, so it's very sturdy. And it's both externally and internally sized, so you shouldn't have any issues. This is a very durable paper. If you do try the drawing paper and it works out wonderfully, let me know. I would love to see what kind of paper you used and the process that you had. I'm always curious to see if what I suggest is not quite right. Now, if you're doing it this way, where you let everything dry and you use the satin gel to adhere it to your paper. If you do it that way, you're going to place something heavy on top of this while it is drying, because you want this gel to dry completely before you peel this off of your jelly plate. And I suggest at least 2 hours, if not overnight, just to be safe. Now, since I didn't use this gel and my paint was fairly thin, I'm hoping that this is pretty dry. We'll take a peek. Now this probably was already kind of dry. I'll show you what it looks like. So this would have been one where I wanted to use the satin gel for it to transfer perfectly. Because once that is slightly dry, it's no longer going to stick to your paper. So that's why I like to use this, put a really thick layer of this, and then immediately put that paper on there so there's really good adhesion. You have another question?
Yes, we have a question on YouTube wondering about the different kinds of media that can be used on the acrylic paper pad. You might have talked about it a little bit earlier, but can you sort of go back over what can be used with the paper you're using currently?
Yeah, so any fluid media, so watercolor, gouache, ink, acrylic, you can even use dry media. I've used colored pencils, though it's a very rough surface. You can use markers. It's very similar to their mixed media paper in terms of how much it can like take. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
They had a sort of a follow-up question. Yeah. So this paper can be used with the jelly, and it can be used to be painted on directly as well.
Yes, of course. The only reason I did the jelly plate monoprint transferring is because I wanted to do the same media for both of these different papers. So I'm using acrylic on this paper, but doing it in a printmaking fashion. You can absolutely paint directly on here. So that was the process for this specific one. This is another print I did using the same process, again on that Firenze paper. This is actually a family photo underneath an arch. But you get really fun textural images with this process. So definitely try it out if you're interested. All right. Let me know if you have any final questions when it comes to the monoprint jelly plates or the Firenze paper, but I'm going to switch on over to the other paper, which is going to be Pescia. Now, the Pescia paper is going to be made specifically for printmaking, which is why I wanted to do the jelly plate with acrylic for the acrylic paper. Anyway, so for the Pescia paper, it comes in a variety of different colors. So there's 5 different colors for this. There's going to be white, off-white, cream, gray, and a light blue. Now I have played with this paper before. If you've watched the other episode where I used this Magnani Pescia paper, I did etching, which I have here. You can use any printmaking process with this paper, I should say. So this one here is going to be the acrylic etching or dry point etching. This is going to be a zinc dry point etching. And then I also have a linoleum print, which we'll do for you today. Now, when it comes to their process in making the Magnani paper, I think I'm going to be using either the white or the gray for this. The difference between the Pescia and the Firenze is the Pescia is not going to be externally sized. It is going to be internally sized only, and it is going to be a very smooth texture. Now, that is because in order to get a nice transfer with printmaking, you want a smooth and absorbent surface. So, let's go ahead and start working on a print. Now, another thing that's different from the Firenze paper is it's going to be, I believe, a little less thick. So it's going to be 140 pound rather than 188, which was the Firenze paper. And it uses vegan sizing. Now, I'm not sure if all of their sizing is vegan, but in relation to other printmaking papers, if you're trying to find a specific printmaking paper, Magnani's Pescia paper is made with vegan sizing. Now, if you are not used to linoleum printing or you've never heard of it, I just want to kind of show you the process where I got to this and then the final print. So I like to do my sketch in Sharpie. So let's say I have a little smiley face and a bird. No man inside of a building. It's basically the same thing, right? Yeah. Now the next thing I want to do is when you carve this, this is going to look the same color. So I'll show you real quick. I have one of our new carving sets here. Let's see. Let's do this guy. Which is kind of cool. You just pop this straight in the top and it's already ready to go. And then when you're done, you have this tool. Stick it in the bottom. It comes right out. I love it. Okay. So when you carve into this, it is going to be the exact same color, maybe a little bit lighter. So it's hard to tell where you've carved and where you haven't. So I just want to show you a quick little trick that I do when it comes to doing a linoleum block carving. I take a piece of paper towel and I get it wet. And then I take a little bit of acrylic, doesn't matter the color or the kind, and I just tone the surface of the linoleum block. Until it's a slightly different color. and then I let it dry. And now you can see that there's a little bit more of a contrast where I did the carving. It makes it a lot easier to see where you're carving, what you've done, and then you'll just let this dry and you can go ahead and get started. Now another tip, this is going to be a bench hook. It's a little Z shape. It will sit on the edge of your table, and when you put this in here, your block isn't going to be moving away from you when you carve. And lastly, while you are carving, please carve away from yourself. Do not hurt yourself. So always have both hands behind the blade and carve away from yourself. If you're getting, just move your block if you need to get a different angle. But do not to carve towards your fingers. Practice safety. Anyway. And then boom, boom, boom. Look at that. Carved it.
Magic of television.
Alright, so once you get to this point, you are ready to go. Sometimes I like to do like a quick alcohol wipe just to make sure if I'm doing a light color I don't get any of this Sharpie transfer. Alright. And then I'm going to be using the same brayer. I have some Speedball ink, and this is going to be water-soluble ink. And I'm not going to dampen my paper. You can if you want to, but you are trying to pick up the surface rather than the indentations. So the reason people wet their papers for etching, for example, is so that it creates more flexibility for it to kind of meld into the crevices that are holding the ink. This one you're trying to pick up the surface, so if it's dry and straight, that's preferable. However, if you're getting some issues with transferring, if you moisten it just slightly, you don't want beads on the surface. If you moisten it slightly, it might help with the transfer of the ink. Now I'm going to take that same paper pad, maybe stuck to my jelly plate, and I'm going to do the same thing. Now I will say you can use your bench hook as a inking pad, but that feels messy to me. So we're going to use a disposable palette for that. And again, you're going to take your ink, create a little bit, oh, there goes my jelly plate. Create a little bit of a line. Let me get that open. Okay, create a little bit of a line at the top of your pad. And you don't want to take all of it at once, so I just take a little bit, maybe I need a little bit more, and I just roll it. And something I learned when I was first doing printmaking and using a brayer, you don't want it to be super sticky. You just want a nice subtle hiss, and that's the perfect consistency. Now, I'm just going to roll this over the surface. If you carved it deep enough, you shouldn't get a lot of chatter, which is what is this. In between your purposeful carving lines, there might be some chatter. And if there's a lot of open space on the edges, you'll pick up chatter. Some people like chatter, some people do not. I'm someone who is not a fan, but is starting to be more appreciative of it. So keep that in mind, that that is something inherently vinyl printing. That's not a great sentence, but you know what I mean. It is bound to happen when it comes to lino printing. Now, if you're not using a press, it's a little bit hard to do some, what is the word?
Printing?
No, registration. registration.
Oh yeah.
Gotcha.
So you can create a little block for your plate and then another square for your paper on your desk. Now, I like to kind of cheat it. And I lay my paper down face side up and kind of line things up this way. Let it stick just a smidgen. And then I'll flip it and use my Baron. And if you are not used to printmaking, this is a Baron. It has felt on the bottom here. It's basically, if you're an at-home printer or a spoon, this is going to be your at-home printing press. Now for this in particular, you want nice pressure, and you want to make sure you have even pressure. So I'm just going to go through. Hopefully I can get just enough pressure where I have a nice print. If I don't, I have a good one to show you. And I will say, printmaking, you never know if it's going to turn out perfect. It is a trial and error type of process. So hopefully I can give you a really nice print for this. And if you're doing this process and you have like rice paper, for example, you'll be able to see when it is perfectly transferred. But since this is really nice and thick, you won't be able to see it going through. It is also internally sized, so of course you won't see the ink coming through to the other side, which I kind of love. But, moment of truth, let's see. Oh, not quite. Let's do a little bit more. I did a little peek. Just a little bit extra pressure. All right. We're just gonna pull it. All right. So not crazy amount of pressure, but I'll show you. I used the Baron for quite a while on this one, and I got a really nice crispy print here. And another thing, most printmakers, professional printmakers, will tell you to always use registration. If you're doing this at home and you're anything like me, I like to do this and then trim it down afterwards if it's not straight or the borders aren't perfect. And another thing is, if you're also like me and you have dirty hands and touch your prints, I did find that this paper is great and you use a magic eraser sponge, which I use for watercolors. If you just get this a little bit wet and you have fingerprints from the ink, since this is water soluble, you can wipe away any extra fingerprints from the edges, which I did for this one because I got fingerprints on it. But anyway, so this is what I have for the Pescia paper. Do we have a quick question?
We do. On YouTube, Eddie was wondering if it is not possible to use a clean brayer to transfer the ink to the paper.
So,
Instead of a Baron. Instead of a
oh,
thing.
yeah, you could. Absolutely. Just be careful with the edges. You don't want to create too much of a, what's the word? My words are failing me today. If you go too hard along the edges, you might get too much of an indentation of the plate into your paper. Sometimes that's okay. Just be careful and mindful of that. All right. Now, are there any other questions or asks for me? Otherwise, I can do a couple more prints. I kind of sped through it for you guys today. Put these off to the side. I do have some smaller sheets. You have a question?
Yeah. Can you paint paint on top of the print that you just made?
Absolutely. Since this is not externally sized, be careful with the media that you choose. It is going to soak into the paper. Since it is internally sized, it shouldn't bleed through to the other side. But we can see maybe what acrylic does on here. Got a Posca marker. Oh yeah, absolutely. You can even color it first and then do the print on top, which is what I would recommend so that your print is nice and crispy. And then you have some color peeking through. You have a question?
Yes, we have a friend on TikTok who is wondering if you would be able to use it with oil-based ink and what the differences would be.
You can use it with oil-based inks. The difference is going to be, I think it transfers a lot easier. These papers are made to hold up to printmaking inks, and a lot of them are oil-based, so you shouldn't have any issues. But yeah, another question?
Yes, we have one question on YouTube. Can you create multiple copies with the jelly printing method?
Like multiple transfers?
I believe that is the
Okay.
question.
No. If you do it the way I did for these ones, once you pull off that acrylic, it is completely off the jelly plate for the most part and transferred completely onto your paper. If you're using different types of inks that are not like acrylic that dries super quickly, you might be able to get two prints. So you would get a nice crispy print and then you would get a ghost print. But after two, you probably wouldn't get much of a transfer. Now I have another block somewhere that I could print. Here it is. I have these guys. Maybe we'll see what these look like. Let me know if you have any other questions, but once I do these guys, I think we're gonna call it for the day. Emmy's gonna be so upset. I already got ink on her perfectly white little tablecloth. Alright. Another little transfer. And this one, my ink might have been a little dry, so we'll see how this one transferred. Oh, he shifted, but he's there. All right. Move these out of the way. Do you have a question?
As a follow-up to the previous question, about how many prints can you get from one linoleum block before the image starts to fade?
I would say maybe two. Like I said, the first one's going to be crispy, the second one and third one are going to be ghost prints, so they're always going to be a little fuzzy. If you're okay with ghost prints, then you can have one or two of those. We can go ahead and show one if you're curious. So, get get some fresh ink. And we'll do it on the same paper here. And you can see a watermark, maybe. Focus. I know you like those over there. Focus. There we go. Alright. So let's do our little apple. I got a little apple here. And since this is water-based, it does dry a lot faster than oil-based ink, so the results may vary. We'll see. Try and do it quickly. We'll do one down here in the corner. Nice crispy print. And then I'll do one right next to it without re-inking. I can already tell when I'm flipping it over that there's not quite as much stickiness, so it's harder to flip it. Alright. So there's the second one. It did transfer, but it is going to be very ghosty. Again, if it's oil-based ink, you'll probably get 1 or 2 more ghost prints out of it than you did with the water-based. Another question?
Yeah, so how long, what is like the life cycle of a linoleum block? Like how long before the edges start to break and make the image, like if you're going to re-ink it over time?
Yeah. So this one I printed, I think, 12 times. I was using it to test a new printmaking ink, and it hasn't been damaged at all. I will say the linoleum itself will age over time, but not the amount of times you print it, I don't believe. I've never run into that where I've printed it too many times. Like, I've done a linoleum block and I printed it over 100 times with just one block, and it was still holding up just fine. All right, any final questions? I will say that if you are still watching, there is going to be a giveaway for this episode. So for the giveaway, we are giving away the Firenze paper. So that's going to be the paper made for acrylic, specifically the 7x10. We're giving away 2 of these. And our lovely moderators, Amanda and Jillian, will be able to put a link for the sign-up document in the chat. Now, do not sign up in the chat. Make sure you fill out all the information in the document that they post in there in order to have a chance to win one of these guys. And if you do win one of them, or if you take one of these home yourselves, please share what you've created, or even if you're just working on printmaking already, we always love to see what you guys are doing. Our Facebook group, and if you are not a part of it yet, don't forget that one security question in order to join. But that was our Magnani paper show. I hope you really enjoyed it. It was a very quick run through of 2 very fun printmaking processes on 2 very fun and unique papers. If you have any extra questions for me, go ahead and put it in the comments for the video, and I'll always come back through and see if I have any unanswered questions. But thank you guys so much for joining me, and we'll see you next week. I will be here again, and I'm going to be talking about custom framing for round surfaces, and it's going to be super fun because I have 2 very different and unique ways to customize your frames, which are kind of scarce when it comes to round surfaces. So I hope I see you guys next week. All right. Thank you again for coming, and we'll see you next time. Bye.